Good morning and welcome to Meshach's weekly life exhortation. For today's exhortation, we'll be looking at Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, and it reads, "And so I tell you, Peter, you are a rock, and on this rock foundation I will build my church, and not even death will ever be able to overcome it." From the passage just read, I will briefly speak to you on the theme manage God's church property. It is the Lord that is speaking to Peter in this scripture. In this passage, the Lord is telling Peter, He's saying, Peter, you are a rock, and on this rock foundation, I, the Lord, will build my church, not your church, Peter. And not even death will overcome it. So the church belongs to God. We are just managers of the church. We are just caretaker of the church. So whenever you are placed over the church, you should not think that you own the church. What you need to think about is the church is owned by the Lord, and you are there managing the church. And so you will give an account. There will come a time that you will give an account of how you manage God's church. Mind you, if you are a manager of an institution, maybe for instance, a program manager, a finance manager, you need to give a report of how you manage the program of the institution, how you manage the finances of the institution. That's the same way with the church. There will come a time that we will give a report of how we manage God's church that does not belong to us. So we shouldn't have the mentality that the church is ours. We own the church. No. The church is owned by God, and we are just stewards. We are just managers. We are just caretaker of the church. So when you are a pastor and you are placed over the church as the leader of the church, you must manage the church properly. Make sure that God's vineyard is clean. The church is clean. The church is beautiful. You need to do all you can to put every mechanism in place for God's church to be clean. You cannot be living in a decent house and God's church be looking like, something that is disorganized. The church must be organized. The church must be managed properly. The finances of the church must be managed properly. When people pay their offering, people pay their tax, people pay their tithe, it should be managed properly. So as managers of the church, we need to do all we can to manage the church properly. Because there will come a time that we will give an account. When we are good managers, the Lord will bless us. The Lord will protect us. He will always be with us. All we need is to manage the church properly. Let's do all we can to manage God's church properly. For the members, most often we think that the church is owned by the pastor, and so we refuse to support the church. If you are a member of the church, you need to get it in mind that the church is not owned by the pastor who is the head of the church. The pastor is just managing the church. And so when you are able to support the church in any way, you must support the church. and get off that mentality that the church is owned by the pastor. The church is not owned by the pastor. The church is managed by the pastor. And so when you are able to support the church in any way, do that. When you are able to, if you are able to support any member of the church in any way, do that. When you are able to give to the church in any way, do that. And the Lord will bless you. He attached a lot of importance to the church. If he bless you, be a blessing to the church. It's my prayer that the Lord will help us to manage his church well. That the Lord will help us to be able to support the church well. May God bless these words and satisfy them in our hearts for Christ's sake. Amen.